Okay, we're going to continue our quest to make a Sprite Slice renaming utility, and hopefully your knowledge of some of the editor stuff will increase with some of this, and maybe you can use it for other things that you want to get done. What we've done so far is we have created, or we know how to right-click on Sprite Slices that are inside of a texture. And then we have this little test function that we can run, and it will give us the name of the texture, which we'll need. Actually, we're going to get this name of the meta file, and we're going to end up going into that. That's what we're doing for this episode. If you haven't seen the other episode, I would suggest that you watch that one. A romping good time of code, if you will. So this is what we have. So we have this validation function that we wrote last time so that we make sure that all of the sprites are in the same texture, so that we can do them all in one sweep, and we don't support sprites in different textures. Although you could, it would just kind of complicate the code a little bit, and there's really no reason to do that. So what we'll do now is let's think about what we might want to do in order to rename these sprites. Well, for one thing, let's make a function that says what we want it to do. So I would say, let's say rename Sprite Slices. How's that? So what we need is, let's say, the asset file path. Let's say asset path. So the path to the texture asset. Let's do that. Texture. I'll just call it. No, let's call it texture. Texture 2D path. And what would we need to? What we could do is we could have a dictionary which takes a string as a key and gives a string as a value. So this would be the we call this rename map. So the key would be the original name of the Sprite Slice, and then the new key would be the new name of the Sprite Slice. Simple. So let's check, though. Let's do some preliminary checks, and let's make sure that this path is not null or empty, and that or if the rename map is null, or the rename map the count, the number, is 0, then let's just, we could go and do more error stuff, but we'll just say I'm just going to say bad parameters, and then we'll just return. And you can add what you want there, of course. So when we get past that, let's check the meta file, and we know that the meta file should be meta file name should just be the texture 2D path. And I'm changing my mind again. Let's just call this asset path. So the asset path, and let's use some C#6 here because that's fun. I like it. Let's do the $, and we're going to do string interpolation, which is great. So that would be the asset path .meta. So we're just adding the .meta to that string right there and sticking it in as the meta file name. And that's the $, says that we want the C# compiler to do string interpolation, and that lets us do this kind of stuff. Really neat stuff. It's a lot better than doing string.format and setting all that stuff up. It's just easier. It's a syntactic sugar. What we need to do, though, is we need to test if that file exists. So there's a file command in system.io called exists, and we'll just say meta file name. And if that does not exist, then we need to log an error again. We say debug.log error, and let's do another string interpolation here. Unable to find meta file, and then we'll just say meta file name right here. So nice. Okay, we'll return. So we want to make sure that that meta file is there. And as doing some research and looking into some of this stuff, of course, some of these meta files can be hidden. So some people will hide the .meta files in their file system. And I haven't actually checked to see what happens, but from what I've seen in some of the stuff I've read is that it's not good if they're hidden. So if that is the case, then you'll want to unhide the meta file when you do, because we're going to modify it. So let's what we need to do that is we need to grab the attributes. So call it meta attributes equals, and then there's under file there's a get attributes function, and it just wants a path, which is that meta file name. So we'll grab the attributes. So these are the original attributes, right? So what we want to do is we want to make sure the meta file is not hidden when we work on it. So there's a file.set attributes function, and that takes a path. So that's just going to be the meta file name, and then the attributes. And that will be meta attributes, and we'll do a logical and we'll say we want to invert file attributes dot hidden. So all that does when you do a logical and with that, or I mean a bitwise and, sorry, with the meta attributes that we have here, it will basically clear that hidden flag so that if it is there, it will turn it off. And that's exactly what we want. And then later on we want to reset the attributes on the meta file, which would just be file.set attributes, and we'll just set the meta attributes like that. Now, so this looks like kind of a nice pattern. And I know that there's going to be some because we've got this meta file that we want to do some manipulations on, and then we have this to do, which is manipulate the meta file. What might be nice would be to instead have some kind of function that we would pass in that we would just execute here, and would just give it the file name, since we had already made sure that everything was not hidden, and then we rehide it. So let's see, what would that look like? That would be a func. No, it wouldn't. It would be an action, and it would be a string, just to give it the file name. Our manipulate method, manipulate action, and then we would just call that manipulate action, and we could actually do a conditional invoke there, which is cool. Oh, and we have to do meta file name like that. So this just says if this is null, then don't do this. Let's see where we get with that. So that kind of gives us a nice compact thing. And let's just say this. Let's say let's just say manipulate meta file. Yeah, I like that better, because we'll use this for well, I'm not sure. We may want to use this to do some other things other than just doing some renames. So I'm going to set it up like this for now. So what we would want to do is come up with a manipulation action, which is what we were this would just be rename sprites. Rename sprites. And it could be string meta file name. So really all we would do we would call manipulate meta file here. Actually, and since our validate function was correct, we should be able to just get that active. So the active object should be the first one selected, so the path should be fine from that. And then we should be able to just say manipulate meta file path, and then the action would be our rename sprites. And then from that, we could come and grab this stuff again. Since we already have the meta file name, right? So what we want to do is create, basically we want to create a dictionary, that same dictionary that we had started with. Dictionary string, and we'll call it the rename map. Okay, so then we'll go through all of these instance IDs, grab the object. We don't need to check it anymore because we've already validated it, so we know that it's going to be a sprite. So let's combine these two steps here. Let's just go ahead and cast it as a sprite. So we know it's a sprite because we've already validated. And we know the name of the meta file, so we don't need to get the texture name. We have our new name here, and let's just come up with something that's good. Very good. So we'll call it, the new name is good. And let's make an int index equals 0. And so there's our sprite. And so let's check and see what if the IDs, the count or the length. Let's say if it's equal to 1, we don't want any kind of suffix on the end of it. So the _0 shouldn't be there. So if we're just renaming 1, that makes no sense. So then we would add, from that we would say our rename map, add, the key would be sprite.name, and then the rename would be that new name right there. Otherwise, the rename map, we would add the sprite name, and then we'll do another string interpolation, and we'll say new name, and we'll do the same pattern that Unity does. We'll do the underscore like that. So we create our rename map here. So we'll just say create our rename map. Now the reason we want to do that is because when we get into this meta file, what we will do is the following. We'll have a lines, so we're going to read all the lines. So we'll do file read all lines, I think it is, and that gives us an array of lines, which is what we want. Yeah, you can do it different ways, but we're going to do it this way. Meta file name. So now we have all the lines, and what I want to do is make a string builder. So we will basically build our new file from all of these lines. There's also a read lines, which gives you an IEnumerable string. Let's do that one instead. Then we just do for each line in lines. So what we want is, let me go find our rogue-like items PNG ping meta file. So we've obviously need to search for this type of configuration with whatever name we want. So we're going to use some regular expressions here. So to do here is search for names in the meta file, see if they are in the dictionary or the rename map. If they are, then do the rename. Actually, we'll just say that. Then do the rename. And add the line to the string builder. So what we get at the end of this would be something like file.write. Let's write all, not all lines, but we would just write all text since we're building it in the string builder. And we would put it back in the meta file name. And the contents would be sb.toString, so our string builder.toString. And then we would be finished. So let's say write the changed meta file to the disk. So when we did that here, the other thing that we would want to do is we would need to say asset database dot probably refresh so that it could go through those meta files and see that that one had been changed. I think that is required, so we'll add that up there and we'll see. And when we come back, we'll create the regular expressions that we'll need to parse our file. So we'll search for this type of structure, and then we'll go and look for this little part here, because as I said, each name has two places within this meta file. So when we come back in part 3, we will do that, and we should have something that actually works. See you then.